5 minutes to start. Take it slow.
We're waiting for it.
Yeah.
The guys are on the tractors today. They were in
Then it's by the Brant.
that's why they're
It'll be here.
Okay.
I'm all weird on that, you know, so.
Okay. Well, there's not much we can do. Let's hope this is not an indication of lack of interest.
Hope they bring a better show here than they did last night, I'm sure. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. What they got, 3 million?
Oh, I don't know about that. I watched the debate. It was just, I'm glad I had a headache in my mind now.
Is it almost 7:30 or is this watch late? Okay. Oh, the lights are wicked. Okay, you don't see Chief Moderator Anybody of importance?
I don't know. If not, that's all.
All right?
Lynn Johnson.
Yeah. Okay. Make sure my phone wasn't turned on. Okay. I hope you helped yourself to some coffee and some donuts before we start. And there's also water. Compliments of Brant County Federation of Agriculture. Okay. Well, I'm going to start. I would just like to say welcome to coming tonight to the first all candidates meeting for the Brant riding for the federal election, which is to be on May 2nd. I am absolutely thrilled you've been able to crawl off your tractors and come tonight, because I know everywhere I drove today, people were either on their manure spreaders or their fertilizers. So appreciate you taking the time to come tonight. I would just like to say on behalf of the Brant County Federation of Agriculture, we're very pleased to be able to rent the Brant Twin Pad. We thought it was an opportunity to showcase something wonderful from the county that actually was partly some federal money that came from the government, as well as provincial and municipal and private donations. We are pleased to offer this tonight, and I'd like to thank the people at BCFA. We have question people. We have people who help with setup, and I will introduce Bob Hamilton, who is the moderator for this evening. We've had Bob before, and we're really pleased he could come back tonight. Bob will be able to explain the rules and give you the gist of how we operate here at the All Candidates meeting, and we will be pleased to take as many questions as we can. Tonight we have the honor, and we're very grateful that Rogers is here to tape and to record everything that goes on, as well as we have media and press people from a variety of different places.
In 1 minute, we're going to
Okay.
start, so just hang on.
I think everybody's at Bite of Brant recovering today. You gonna hit me?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Okay.
And you can start it off. So once I hear the music, I'll tap you.
Okay.
introduce yourself and go.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Voss, the president of Brant County Federation of Agriculture, and I would like to welcome you here tonight, not only as citizens of the county, citizens of the province, but citizens of Canada. And that's why we're here tonight, to listen to our candidates so we can make an informed choice and vote on May the 2nd. It is my pleasure to introduce the 6 candidates that are in the riding of Brant for this election. And I will start to my immediate left in no particular order. We have Leslie Borey, who is running as an independent, Nora Foughton, who is of the Green Party of Canada, Mark Laferriere, who is our NDP representative, Phil McColman, who is our incumbent of the Conservative Party, Lloyd Santamand, who is our Liberal Party of Canada representative, and finally Martin Sitko, who is another independent running in our riding. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, who is Robert Hamilton, and he will go over the rules for the candidates up here at the front, as well as instructions to the crowd of how you are to handle your questions and how we will come and pick them up with them. So thank you all for taking time to come out of your busy lives to come here tonight, and we are really pleased as members of the Agricultural Federation that we can offer the first all candidates meeting for Brant. Thank you.
For the people in the crowd, there's tags out there for questions, or you may have picked one up on the way in. If you have a question from the floor, please fill that out. We will have a runner. Ken, I think, is going to be running. Get them to him. They bring it up here, and we will then go forward. I will then read the question to the candidates and go from there. For the candidates, they're going to have 3 minutes for an introduction of their position and where they stand for Brant riding. After that, we will get into the question part, and during the questions, when a question is put forward, we will put it to the candidates. They will have 90 seconds to respond to that, at which point then they will pass it on to the next candidate. If any candidate does not want to respond, just signal to me, and that will be fine, to a particular question. And then we will rotate and carry on that way. And then to finish it off, we will give them a 2-minute recap to let you know where their positions stand, and then you can go ahead and do whatever is needed as you get ready to vote on the 2nd of May. Okay, to start off, we're going to start off here on the left, my left, straight through, and we'll start with Leslie, and he will have a 3-minute introduction. We will look after the microphones, and if everybody could just stay seated, the microphone should be there. That good gentleman over there in the corner will make sure you're heard very well. Go ahead, Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Borey, one of the independent candidates in the riding of Brant. We can't keep doing the same things that got us in these economic times and expect those same things to get us out of these times. We've got to do something different than we've been doing. We've been letting imported cheap goods come into Canada, and there's a time that we used to call this dumping. And the reason is because it's bad for manufacturing. Somewhere someone's taught us that bringing cheap things into our country, putting ourselves out of work, is a good thing. A nation that doesn't make anything for itself isn't really a strong nation at all. Eventually we'll get to the point where we can't even make our own armaments and defend ourselves. Our machine tool base has been depleted. It's been sold off to other countries, and they use these machines to make the cheap goods that put us out of work. There's no way to run a country. It's not right. There are better things to do than that. If we let private banks continue to create our money the way that we do, most people think that banks lend you other people's money. They don't. They create it on the spot. And if we continue this, it's going to keep us in debt. And if they charge interest on this money, it makes it a mathematical possibility for anyone to pay it back. That's why we have these cycles of depression. Canada should create its own money, not let private banks do it for us, and then not charge interest on it. If we did this, we could pay off our national debt, and instead of using that 25% of our tax to pay the debt or to maintain it, we can replace property tax once we pay the debt off. And when you create your own money, every penny that gets created, we get to use it twice. Once for the initial purchase of your home or whatever you're going to use it for, and after you pay it back to the bank, if it's a Bank of Canada, it goes back to the Treasury. We can use it as a tax without interest. I think that would help our economy a little bit. We should nationalize our national resources. Why are we paying world prices for fuel that comes out of our soil? I think our nation would be a little bit stronger if we took a little bit better stewardship of our land. We shouldn't let other people tell us what to pay for our own resources. It's not right. We've been lied to so often. When Ontario Hydro was sold, they told us that the price of fuel or hydro would go down. Instead, it doubled. And now we're still paying for that. I think we should take matters into our own hands and settle this out of court during this election. We've got immigration right now where we let hundreds of thousands of people in the country when there aren't many jobs. I think we should cut this back. 52% of immigrants live in poverty. Let's bring them up to speed before we bring too many more people into our Canada. And thank you very much for now.
Thank you. Okay, Nora Footen from the Green Party, please.
It was about 20 years that the Green Party started to be heard in Canada. And at that time, I think we were largely connected with the environment, caring for the clarity of our water and our air and so forth. And of course, that base is still very much part of what we are about. However, we have expanded our platform a great deal from that simple base, partly because we realize that caring for our environment has an economical benefit, a community benefit, a benefit to our quality of life all the way around. And so this time we are focusing on three main issues. One is a smart economy. Second is strong communities. And thirdly, and for my taste, one of the most important, is true democracy. By a smart economy, we mean an economy which works well for the people who live here. And if you look closely at our platform, you will find that we are suggesting that people like the oil companies that are developing the oil sands and people like the banks and the large corporations who are constantly pushing for a lower corporate tax cut, that those are not the people that we want to support. We feel that they are already doing very well and they can afford 18% corporate tax cut and they can get along with their oil sands developments without almost $1 billion a year in tax credits. Now that money can be put to much better use in trying to build the strong communities we would like to have. Our municipal infrastructures across the country are in sore need of improvement. Roads, sewers, waters, all of those things have been, the water mains have been under the ground there for a long time in this part of the world. And eventually we have to renew and replace all of those pipes. Now, we need the money for that. We need the money which will help educate our young people. We need money for childcare and early childhood education, as well as for more advanced education so that our people are equipped to hold down good jobs and to innovate new businesses and to develop new creative solutions to our energy problems and to the way in which we live our lives together. Of course, healthcare comes under that heading as well. Our healthcare is very important, but so is preventative medicine, trying as much as possible to urge people to live healthy lives so they don't end up in the hands of the big drug companies. And finally, as I said, true democracy. That means a democracy which works for everyone, that every voice, every shade of opinion is heard in our parliament, and that we all respect one another and work cooperatively to make this country as strong as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Third one is Mark LaPerriere from NDP.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers for holding this event in this wonderful venue with a lot of wonderful people. I am part of the first generation guaranteed to do worse than our parents, statistically. Whether it comes to wages, whether it comes to work conditions, whatever it does come to, it's looking fairly bleak for people of my generation and those younger. And I believe people from my generation and those younger need a seat at that table to try and fix some of the solutions, to look ahead at the next 40 years and not just the next 4. If we keep running the same people, we'll keep getting the same results. And we think that we need to open the doors on engagement problem solving. Now, it's not all bleak. We live in a great community. I like to say it's a perfect slice of Canada. It's urban, it's rural, it's Aboriginal, and it's multicultural. It's an amazing mix. We're blessed by our geography as well. However, we do have problems, and I think locally we have solutions that could act as a model across the country. It's great to be out in the county. I spent a lot of time here, and everyone who knows the history of the NDP knows its close ties to the CCF, which was agriculturally based. Farmers banding together across the country saying, we want fairness. Now we have people all across the country saying, we want fairness. Fairness in healthcare, fairness in the economy, fairness in the numbers that are given. We want transparency. These aren't small issues. These are big issues. But if we open up a dialogue, if we're able to speak together, we're able to work cooperatively, these are hurdles I think we can overcome. Now, we also need strong advocates. For a very long time, we've seen a shift in balance. And I'd like to see that change. We need strong advocates for things like small business. Small business are amazing job creators in our community, and they need to be treated fairly. We see a corporate tax cut over and over and over again that the other parties have implemented, and you can look at their voting record for information on that. What we're proposing is a small business tax cut, to take that from 11% to 9%. And we'll get it done. We've got it done in Nova Scotia. We've got it done in Manitoba. Manitoba, under an NDP government, is the first jurisdiction in Canada to have a 0% small business tax. Things are a little fairer there, and they should be a little fairer here. We also need to reward our job creators. A blanket corporate tax cut doesn't make much sense. To those of you in the audience who have children, you don't give them an allowance unless they cut the lawn or do the dishes or any of those things. And we're giving companies a corporate tax cut just because. It's wrong. We need to tie some strings to that. And if we do, well, we'll find leadership in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate, Phil McComan from the PC Party.
Well, good evening, and thank you to the Federation, the local Brant Federation of Agriculture, for hosting this first debate, and thank you to the people who are here and the ones watching this first debate. This is very much a watershed election. There are major choices to be made in the platforms of all of our parties here today. Let me just say this from the outset. The time I've served in Ottawa, I've watched the Federation and the various sectors of the agricultural industry represent your businesses, the agribusiness, second to none. And we have some leaders in the audience tonight here who are here and lead on a provincial and national level in advocating for you. They come to Ottawa. I've met with them frequently. And I just want to say and compliment how your Federation has been influential in terms of government policy. And nowhere more than Brant are Canadian farmers the examples of the mainstay of small and rural communities. Since being elected, I have worked with our Conservative government and our leader to address the issues of your important businesses and your group and rural activity. Our track record speaks for itself. We have been resolute in our defense of supply management. Our government invoked GATT Section 28 to limit imports of milk protein concentrate, and we established cheese compositional standards to ensure that real milk is the ingredient in Canadian cheese. We passed the Agricultural Loans Act that gives young farmers access to government-backed credit. We have continued to support research and innovation so that Canadian farmers and agribusiness will be competitive. And we have defended and developed new world export markets. There is so much more to do. And that is why a stable, majority Conservative government will create a 5-year national farm and food strategy to guide Canadian agricultural policy and to ensure the survival of family farms. We all know that Canadian produce and Canadian farm-produced goods are the best in the world, and it's important that our farmers be able to compete on a global basis and into the global market. A stable Conservative government will be proud to support our farmers and provide access to new markets for produce grown and products that are part of the agribusiness. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is Lloyd St. Amand from the Liberal Party.
Well, thank you very much, and like others, I want to thank all of you for coming, for demonstrating in a tangible fashion your interest in important issues in this community. I want to thank the organizers as well, timekeeper, moderator. It's a great kickoff to what has already been and promises to be a very engaging election campaign. For me, leadership is looking ahead. Leadership is sorting out what we need to do now to posture ourselves successfully with prosperity for the next 5 years, the next 20 years, for the next 2 and 3 generations. What is it that we need to do now? We agree that 144 years, people like Phil and others have built this country, elected representatives, just as the voice of the people, though. We have all together built a magnificent country, but it's not perfect, and it needs improvement in certain areas. And with respect to agriculture, we need, for the first time, a national food policy. And that's what a Liberal government proposes to do, to implement a national food policy with certain components. Safe food. There should be a comprehensive review of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, because there are problems at times with the safety of our food. So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency needs to be looked at and reviewed in a very comprehensive fashion. And to do that, a Liberal government would commit an additional $50 million over 4 years to improve food inspection, to improve food safety. A second component of a national food policy is sustainable farm incomes. The current programs are fluid, they're confusing, they're layered. We want to review the current programs which exist with a view to restoring AgriFlex to its original mission, that is, offering regional flexibility programs such as, within the province of Ontario, the Risk Management Program. A federal Liberal government sees clearly the validity of such a program, and we want to see that implemented, again with the view to ensuring the sustainability of farm incomes. I see my time is up. I hope I'll have an opportunity during some of the questions to focus on other components. Thanks very much.
The next candidate we have is Martin Sitko as an independent. Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. In my opinion, as an independent, I feel that Brantford needs to work on economic development, our model of Canadian sovereignty, new tax policy reform, a new Canadian constitutional court which would ensure and protect constitutionally entrenched judicial review, the resolution of our current Aboriginal land claims situation through Aboriginal land claims agreements that we can hopefully reach through the development of this new Canadian Constitutional Court, which I would propose. And that said, working with the Charter section that constitutionally entrenches Aboriginal rights. And a new Meech Lake-style national agreement. Okay. And the federal government must, I feel, as a signatory to the World Trade Organization International Treaty on Agriculture, must refuse and remove its current consent to the World Trade Organization's agricultural agreement conditions that I feel are bankrupting Canadian agricultural industry and Canadian farmers in Brant County and area. So I'll try to get to as many of these as I can explain before my time runs out. First of all, I feel that I would like to advocate for a new constitutional tribunal which would provide the constitutional entrenchment of judicial review. Judicial review is the process whereby a higher court, such as a constitutional court, can act as a check, as a safeguard, a double check on whether or not the legislative branch has created legislation that is in compliance with our Charter of Rights and our Constitution. The Charter of Rights has allowed, I feel, political decisions to be imposed under the force of law, under the disguise of Supreme Court of Canada rulings. The Charter has allowed, according to Osgoode Hall law professor Michael Mandel, the legalization of politics in Supreme Court decisions. If the legalization of politics has occurred in Supreme Court decisions, then neither that court or the Charter of Rights is doing what they were entrusted to do for Canadians: act as an objective judiciary and as a legal tool to check on the balance of federal powers and to ensure the separation of powers, judicial review, and the protection of minority populations, especially Quebec, the province of Quebec, the French people, and other religious minorities in Canada. So we need a charter that can effectively do what it was created to do: ensure the separation of powers theory of law, which is a more European-style theory of law, to ensure the balance of federal powers, and to ensure that federal powers do not become a
5 seconds.
Tyranny of the majority.
Thank you to all the candidates for their introductions. Now we're going into the question period, and just to recap what we're doing here, I'm going to be asking a question that's been put forth for the candidates to respond, and what we'll do is go down the line as we go through some of these. If anybody out there has additional questions, please write them on a piece of paper, get them to the front, and we will try and get all the questions put forth, but if there's a lot of them, we may not. So bear with us, we'll do the best we can. The first question I have, and I'll read it, and I'd like to start with Nora to start the thing, is Canada has no long-term strategy for food and production, processing, distribution systems. There's no plan to ensure secure source of food for the future, nor any direction on how best to utilize resources to help feed ourselves and the 9 billion people projected to inhabit the earth by 2050. Canadian farmers, input suppliers, processors, distributors, along with the health professionals and others, have developed our first national food strategy that will guide a cohesive and planned approach to policy development over the next 20 years. The question that is being put forth is, will you actively promote the adoption of the National Food Strategy as a strategic vision for the food in Canada to guide the development of all policy related to food in Canada? I'll read that a second time. Will you actively promote the adoption of the National Food Strategy as a strategic vision for food in Canada to guide the development of all policies related to food in Canada? Nora?
That's 90 seconds, right? We, of course, are very interested in a long-term strategy with regard to food security in Canada. Our system at the moment is based on cheap imports coming from all around the world to the detriment of us, because often they're not really done to our standards. The taste is not that great, and also to the detriment of those countries from which they are exported, whose people are starving because the cheap imports are all being, exports for them are all being imported to us. We feel that the answer for food security is to get back to a more local-based agricultural economy, based on the family farm, on lots of processing things in a smaller sense where you can trace where food came from, and on healthy food for everyone. Now that means, of course, that you do have to have some funding for transition to allow that to happen. There needs to be income supports for those family farmers, but we feel that the local community with its farming community around it is the way to go if we want to be secure as the prices of oil go up and it becomes more and more difficult to pay for those food imports.
All right. Mark, please.
When we're talking about a national food strategy, we already have it. It's called Food for Thought. Alex Adamenko, our agricultural critic, visited everywhere he could over the entire course of the country, including Brant Haldeman. And while there, developed this strategy. It's 47 pages, and I have 90 seconds, so I'm not going to go through it all. But I will say this. It touches on things like food security and food sovereignty, including looking at some of the WTO agreements we make that often hurt Canadian producers and Canadian consumers. It looks at a balance between the local needs and the environment. It ensures that we'll be profitable and competitive, and it's healthy for both farmers and the public, which is very important. People sometimes forget that a national food strategy has to include our farmers. I know a little bit about local food, the local food networks. I started the community garden. I was a co-founder, the community garden project for Brantford and Brant. There's a lot of talk about what to do, but the best advice is to just go out there and do it. In our first year, we had a 3-acre, practically a farm, a little micro farm. We were able to have a yield of 3,000 pounds of food. 2,000 pounds of those foodstuffs went to the food bank. Another 1,000 was taken home by those who actually worked the garden. 15 seconds still? Okay, well, 10 seconds. I'd suggest people look at it because that model is now also being adopted on Six Nations, and it's a place where we can partner locally, but when we talk about a strategy, we have it, and hopefully, over the course of this entire debate, I'll be able to share more about it. Thank you.
Okay. Phil, would you like to respond, please?
Well, in direct answer to the question, will a Conservative government bring in a national food policy? Yes, and it is in our platform. And I have the platform document here on page 59 right here highlighted, because this is a very, very important thing for the sustainability not only of our own food supply, but the sustainability of farming in an international context in terms of world markets, and now the reliance that many producers have on those international markets. This was brought to me actually at the annual meeting of the Brant Federation, which invites the MPP, myself, and the mayor of the county to listen to the various sectors and kind of the State of the Union address. And this was brought up as one of the strong points that we need to move forward. In that regard, I took that to Ottawa, and along with a number of my other rural colleagues, expressed it directly to Minister Ritz. And so many of us have been doing what we can, and it was very gratifying to see it as part of our national platform. Now, I would also mention that, as my understanding, I haven't read the document, but this is not mentioned in the Liberal platform.
All right. Lloyd, would you like to respond to the question, please?
Well, thanks very much. It's actually page 64 of the Liberal policy platform. When I was a member of the Standing Committee on Agriculture in Ottawa for 2.5 years or so, it was troubling, to say the least, to hear that food produced in Canada is often subject to greater controls when it leaves Canada, when it's exported from Canada, than food which comes into Canada. And as I understand one component of the National Food Strategy, that imbalance, that unfairness will be corrected. Canadian farmers produce terrific food, arguably the safest, finest food. And if it's going to be exported to other countries, as it is, then surely any food that comes into Canada from other countries has to be subject to at least the same regulations, the same scrutiny as food that our proud farmers produce. So would a Liberal government be in favor? Do we advocate for a national food strategy? Absolutely.
Thank you. Martin, any comment?
Thank you. I think honestly that I agree with the idea of a national food strategy, but honestly, looking at the track records of our past federal governments, I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I went on the World Trade Organization's website and I read their legal documents, which Canada is a signatory to. It's called the Agricultural Agreement. And on that agreement, it's legally binding, so anything we're going to address, we would have to address there, and as it stands now, I don't think we can get out of it. That's my opinion. The federal government, as a signatory to that contract, has consented to the World Trade Organization's agricultural agreement, conditions that, in effect, are bankrupting Canadian agriculture business. I have 4 here. I'll try to get through them if I get through them. Number 1. The WTO contracts conditions, and Canada has agreed to import agriculture under market access tariffs that undercut Canadian agriculture domestic prices. Number 2, WTO contracts conditions, and Canada consents that developed countries, including Canada, must cut their domestic policies that support domestic prices and domestic farmers and subsidize production to Canadian farmers. Number 3, WTO contracts conditions, and Canada consents that Canada and all developed countries must import agriculture under market access tariffs that also undercut Canadian agricultural domestic prices. Finally, number 4, the WTO contracts conditions, and Canada consents that Canada must force cuts to export subsidies on their farmers.
Okay.
So quickly.
No, you had your signal there. Leslie?
Canada should make agriculture and food production part of its defense policy. In times of war, we won't have enough food the way we are now. And the way the world is, people are going to be looking at our resources like they're looking into our refrigerators. They're going to take what they want. We might get into it someday with some countries, and we're going to want to have some food backing us up. I recommend that we have 2 years' supply at all times in our nation. We should take agriculture a little bit more seriously. I propose we roll back wages of civil servants and apply that money to provide farm workers with a minimum wage, to encourage people to take up farming and to work on the farms instead of bringing in immigrants all the time. It would provide good jobs for Canadians. It's just as important as building cars. You know, in times of need, if you need the food, if it's not there, you're not going to need a car. It's as important as that. The importance, I think, has slipped. We seem to focus on consumer goods instead of the important things in life anymore. And I think a nation that makes its own farm equipment and things like this is self-sustained regarding farming is a stronger nation. Thank you.
Now for the question number 2, and may I ask the audience just to hold their applause to the end, and then we'll quickly go through this, and we may get a few more questions in by that. So the number 2 question, and Mark, if you would start, I'll read the question twice so you get time. I want my vote to count for a person who will represent the citizens of Brant, not a person who toes the party line. If I were to contact you to express support for a bill and it was against party lines, how would you respond or vote? 1, you support the bill. 2, if you do not support the bill, would you go ahead and vote separately? And with that, I will get, if I want my vote to count as a person who represents the citizens of Brant, not a person who toes the party line. If I were to contact you to express support for a bill and to do it against party lines, and how would you vote or respond to that vote? Would you support the bill? And if you did not support the bill, would you vote against it? And I will leave it like that. There was some, I will say there was some additional comments here I'm not reading on this question, that the individual can contact that candidate after the meeting and talk to him then. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of good mentors in this regard. Derek Blackburn, who is a friend and mentor of mine, always tells me constituents first, party second, sometimes third. And it's very important to remember. I've also had a mentor in a fellow named John Rafferty, who's an MP in Thunder Bay, Rainy River. He's somebody who voted against the party on the long gun registry. We had quite a dramatic vote there, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room are aware of it. I've seen the value of doing that, and I'm no stranger to engagement, whether it's through local idea listening tours we've been having, whether it's through social media, whether it's through face-to-face contact. You have to listen to the concerns of your constituents. And I've done this. As a fairly high-profile candidate within my party, I've disagreed with my party on some things. Listen, no one's going to agree with everything, and anyone who tells you so is not really telling you the truth. I've disagreed with parts of Bill C-36. We had Megan Leslie, the health critic, down, and I expressed that to her. I received no slap on the wrist. In fact, I was encouraged to speak my mind. I'm part of the New Democratic Party, and the word democratic is right in there. So absolutely, you have to speak to the constituents. However, when you do get that information from the constituents, you have to try to do so in an unbiased way. I believe everybody here has received forms before and questionnaires that are loaded and often point someone in the wrong, in a direction, and they shouldn't. We should have unbiased questionnaires, and that's the way we should communicate from MP to constituent. Thank you.
Please hold applause, please. Thank you. Phil?
Well, this is a great question, so thanks for the question, because what a MP needs to do is listen to the constituents. We've done that extensively over the 2.5 years I've been the Member of Parliament in various ways. Obviously, one of the ways is sending questionnaires to people, and always on the questionnaires, there's a completely open body space to send back opinions, and we get a lot of good opinions from people. 2 bills recently that I voted against my government on are C-393, which you should know about, and that was to provide generic drugs to AIDS victims in Africa. I voted against our party line. The second one, not long ago, was the bankruptcy protection laws. These were both NDP private members' bills. And I voted with the private member in this case and not our government, because I felt that workers should have precedence in the case of a bankruptcy. They should have the ability to be placed higher on the order of creditors than they currently have, so that they could get the proper severance, so they often could get the last couple of weeks' wages or perhaps the last month's wages which were owed to them. And I agreed with that. I surveyed our constituents. I always go with the majority of what the constituents and how they would like me to vote.
All right. Lloyd?
Thanks very much. It's a valid question, and it's an interesting question, but it's not a question that lends itself to a simple answer necessarily. Without diluting what Phil has said, there are 2 types of bills which are voted on in Ottawa. Bills which are presented by the governing party, in this case the Conservatives, and private members' bills. Private members' bills are not what are called whipped bills. You can vote in whatever fashion you want without getting any flack, so to speak, from your party. When I was the Member of Parliament, I consulted as widely and as broadly as I could, with as many people as I could. But it's difficult to conclude, if you speak with 50 people, hard to conclude that those 50 people represent the 135,000 people who represent Brant riding. So at the end of the day, we are absolutely guided by those people who put us to Ottawa, absolutely. And to the extent I was able to, I very often, in fact, I think I virtually always voted in favor of the way my constituents wanted me to vote.
Martin?
So that I wanted to, first of all, run rather than be dictated a party policy from above down to me, which I have to comply with. So I think if I was elected, the party, complying with the party wouldn't be my issue, wouldn't be an issue for me, because obviously, yes, I could choose to vote, either way. However, I would want to stipulate that if the majority of some citizens group or citizens from Brantford came to me and I was the MP and they said, we really feel strongly about this, we want you to bring this legislation before the House of Commons. Well, okay, and so if the party is not holding me back, technically speaking, I could do it. But before I would do it, in any case, I would want to tell them honestly whether or not I feel that it would pass, and just so they have a realistic idea about it. I wouldn't want to, just to make them feel happy, yes, we're going to go and do it, and that doesn't pass.
Thank you. Leslie?
Thank you. When I thought of my platform, I didn't use political science to see how many votes I could get by pandering to a few special interest groups. What I did was I thought about what would benefit my people the most. What kind of policies would help my citizens live like men? And that's how I decide my platform. And I certainly wouldn't support anything that doesn't benefit my people, the citizens of my nation. Everything I suggested is very practical. And I would never want to pursue any policy just for the sake of getting a few votes if it was detrimental to my people. That's all I got to say on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Question number 3.
Can I?
Oh, I'm sorry, Nora.
Well, I can just say I would love to be part of a group in Parliament of green parliamentarians. I can't imagine. Having said that, one of the things about the Green Party is that we are encouraged to be ourselves. I remember hearing Elizabeth May saying, by all means, know the Vision Green, know the guidelines, but when you get up there and you're talking to people, be yourself, because you bring something special to the table. And I celebrate that freedom that I have as a member of the Green Party. It occurs to me also that one of the problems that parliamentarians do face is that we do not have proportional representation. There are many systems in which a person could represent the constituency without too much concern about the party. You would vote for the person that you respect as a representative of your constituency, and you would vote also for someone who came from a party whose platform you want to support. And that would free people up a lot, I think. And then you would know that if it was a specific issue, you go to the person that was elected on the basis of being a representative of your constituency.
Now to question 3. Okay, question 3. Farm businesses face levels of risk not experienced by other small business enterprises, including risk of crop and livestock losses to weather, disease, and other related events. Risk of currency fluctuation, external market forces, volatile markets, to name a few. The question that's being put forward: given the fact that the farm businesses need risk management tools, will you fight for the adequate federal contribution to provincial agriculture that can be used in Ontario to fund workable and bankable risk management programs as designed by the Ontario farmer? Phil, I'll let you start after I read the second time. Given the fact that our farm business needs risk management tools, will you fight for an adequate federal contribution to the provincial agriculture that can be used in Ontario to fund workable and bankable risk management programs as designed by the Ontario farmer?
Again, a very good question. I think it was alluded to a little earlier in the conversation here tonight. This was brought to my attention through the local federation of their strong support for risk management. Took that to Ottawa and have discussed it with the minister and discussed it with the government. We have a suite of programs right now. The Liberal candidate mentioned agri-flexibility as one of the ones that is something similar to risk management, but really, frankly, in my opinion, does not get the job done. This is one area where I have not been pleased with the complexity of the current programs, and I have advocated because, again, the majority of the people in the farming industry, in agriculture, in my riding, say that they'd like to have risk management. I'm advocating for that within my own government, even though it's not my government's policy at this point. I know it worked well for the grain and oilseed farmers here in Ontario, but remember this too, it has to be a national program. It has to be able to be adapted nationally, and perhaps agri-flexibility has those elements that can allow the flexibility between the various provinces. But let me tell you unequivocally, I support risk management programming and will continue to advocate as strongly as I can.
Lloyd.
It is, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it is a policy of the Liberal Party to advocate very strongly for a risk management program in collaboration with the province of Ontario. And what the federal government would do if the Liberal Party was elected would be exactly that, to work with the Ontario government to implement a risk management program. It's my sense, I'm not a farmer, but it's my sense that if there's not already a crisis in farming, there's a looming crisis, and that is how to make the family farm sustainable. How to say to the 21 and 22-year-olds, we want you to take over the family farm. We want you to do that. How to persuade the 22, the 25, the 28-year-old that he or she should take that risk. To take that risk. Hazards of weather, disease, international pressures, the high dollar, I mean, all kinds of things are brought to bear on the farmer. The federal government has a role to play to ensure that there is assistance for the farmer, that the risk is managed, hence our very strong support for the risk management program.
Martin.
I absolutely support the idea of a risk management support program, or including all support programs. But like I mentioned about my understanding of the World Trade Organization and what they were aiming for and what they've already got in their legal contracts. And let me just read you a quote from their website, what they are aiming for to get further if they haven't already got it. Okay, quote, the agricultural package that they're proposing and trying to implement on countries including Canada it addresses many other issues of vital economic and political importance to many members of the World Trade Organization. In other words, not Canada, other countries. These include provisions that encourage the use of less trade-distorting domestic support policies. So that would include the Canadian federal government initiating domestic support policies, which would maintain the rural economy, that allow actions to be taken to ease any adjustment burden, and also the introduction of tightly prescribed provisions that will allow some flexibility in the implementation of commitments. Specific concerns of developing countries, i.e. Canada, have been addressed, including the concerns of net food importing countries and least developed countries. So in other words, my take on that is that they, at the expense of Canada, the developed countries, they want to benefit the least developed countries at our expense.
Okay, Leslie.
By lowering the bar on the cost of doing business, by nationalizing our natural resources, by nationalizing our banking system, we can protect farmers and all citizens in times of crisis. By deferring their bank payments for their mortgages. We could take less money. As you know now, that money is created out of nothing. So when the Bank of Canada takes over that, it would provide everybody with a buffer in times of need. We wouldn't have to pay people, we just don't take the money. It would be better for inflation. We could offer farmers interest-free banking and all citizens. Just imagine being able to buy your home for $100,000 and in 25 years not having to pay $200,000 under $300,000 on the same home. Inflation wouldn't rise as much. It would help farmers an awful lot, as well as other citizens. If we stand up for ourselves, we can live a lot better than we are now. We won't need as many special programs for farmers. Thank you.
Oh. Nora, please.
From my experience in farming, I know what it's like. You never know what it's going to be one year to the next. You don't know what the weather is going to be like, and then the market goes crazy, and so it's very hard to run a business that way. And I understand the anxiety around the need for some kind of risk management program. My one concern about a blanket program like that is that it will tend to benefit the big agribusinesses rather than the family farms. And in the Green Party, we are really encouraging the smaller, diverse family farms. And as you have more diversity on your farm, you also are not quite so much at risk, because you may have a poor corn crop, but maybe the hay is great. Maybe the animals do really, really well. We have a different vision of agriculture, as you can hear, from what is currently in place in Canada. But certainly those who are doing their best to produce things efficiently and to the best of their ability do need to have stability, either a risk management program of some kind or some kind of basic income support program for farmers.
Okay, Mark?
The National Food Strategy document that Alex Adamenko created, Food for Thought, has a lot on this, and it was done with careful consideration. Also, our budget, or not our budget, I should say our platform, their budget, our platform has a great deal of information on this. It's costed $160 million per year for a risk management program. That would be 60%. That would be a cost share between us and the provincial governments of 60 for the feds, 40 for the provinces. We need to not just live up to our provincial partners, but surpass them. And we need someone who can be loud on this. Advocacy takes many different routes, and the stronger advocates we have, the more likely something like this is to pass in the House. Now, we've seen a trend over the last several years, two trends that are very troubling. One is funding for agriculture and agribusiness is withering on the vine, while we send wheelbarrows full of money to banks and oil companies. It's an imbalance. It's about priorities there. Now, if we look at the young farmers, and Mr. St. Amand brought this up, we also have a plan there to help them take that risk, and we have costed it as well at $50 million per year. A mentorship program, skills training, and more arable land available to young farmers to encourage them to enter the field. Also, we need to support food tourism and local food networks that will help them be more sustainable locally and create a healthier environment, not just for the farmer, but for the consumer.
Good, thank you. Question number 4, Lloyd, this is, you'll start off. And this one here is about renewable energy. Do you think the federal government should support ethanol products or through subsidies to ethanol producers? The question again, do you think the federal government should support ethanol product or through the subsidies to ethanol producers?
I was involved with the ethanol project locally, the plant which is now in Aylmer, Ontario. Some 650 investors, I believe, 500 or so from Brant. The plant is up and running. I advocated for the provision of $11.2 $2 million to the cooperative, which received the money under the ethanol expansion program. That was in 2005, as I recall. And some of you, I suspect, were investors. I know some of you were. And it was a difficult issue at the time because there was pushback, but on balance, I think the ethanol expansion program worked, and I was in favor of it then, and perhaps to a modified extent or degree, I would be in favor of it now.
Thank you. Martin?
Well, yes, like I said previously, like I would support it, just keeping in mind that the, you know, unless I've completely misinterpreted the whole document, but just so farmers know that in my opinion, the World Trade Organization has its sights directly on exactly those kind of subsidies, you know, to benefit their idea of what fair trade, free trade, international free trade is. And I feel that, you know, if we have to redefine what it means to be a Canadian sovereign nation state, I don't advocate, you know, nationalizing, cutting off the borders and you know, no trade, but I mean, we have to do something that'll let the farmers, the farming, agriculture business be profitable, and that would attract investors back to Canada.
Good, thank you. Listen.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm completely opposed to using land that can be used to grow food, to grow fuel, and that's the end of that. Thank you.
Fair enough. Nora?
Obviously, I'm very much in favor of renewable energy. However, I think that the research has shown that the energy and the water that is involved in the production of ethanol means that it's not actually a saving for the environment. And so I would be opposed, we're talking probably corn mostly here, I would be opposed to supporting an ethanol plant. I think there are other kinds of renewable energy which are more efficient and more responsible. There is the fact that, as we all know, the corn price has gone way up thanks to ethanol. I personally have benefited from that, and that's nice, but that means that people who need corn for feeding their animals or for other reasons are having to pay more for it. The unintended consequences, in other words, of taking fuel from the land has really worked against the validity of using ethanol as a renewable energy source.
A lot of collaboration up on the stage today. Is it okay to?
Yeah, go right ahead, sorry.
Thank you. No problem. You're busy. This is a fairly complex issue, actually, and it gets deeper into renewable energy, which we need a more diverse platform amongst whoever gets into government on diverse energy sources. We need to start getting off of the same fuels we have been in. One of the issues I had with the stimulus money is it went into a lot of sort of old oil expenses, and as we reach peak oil, it is important to renew fuel stocks, but ethanol is not always the best solution on that. So we need to have a more balance, I believe, on this. Now, the corn subsidies there's another issue there, is why are we favoring corn subsidies as opposed to subsidies for crops that would make us more biodiverse and would also allow farmers to have more diversity in what they're selling and what they're making profit from? As it stands right now, it's affecting our health as well. A bottle of Coke is cheaper than a bottle of juice. Food from McDonald's, a lot of it is corn, processed overseas often. It's cheaper than healthy fruit and vegetables from right here in our community. This is something we need to address, and we will address it.
Thank you. Phil?
On this issue of whether we would provide subsidies to ethanol plants, I don't believe our government would want to subsidize the ethanol plants, because in the chain feeding the ethanol plant, there is quite a bit of subsidy perhaps going on already, which is allowing the the products that are being produced in ethanol, primarily corn today, as we've heard, allowing corn producers to reach new heights in terms of the price of corn. But where we are encouraging and have been encouraging is something that the New Democratic candidate actually spoke of, and that's biomass production of other types of crops that could be used to develop ethanol and other energy forms on a sustainable basis. And there's a lot of money gone into government money, federal government money, gone into innovation and research into those materials, particularly in areas that have lost their economies. In this case, Brant, because of the sand plains and the fact that it was primarily at one time a tobacco growing area, we have subsidized and helped businesses get started in the Sand Plains area through our Sand Plains funding to do things like the research required to see whether or not we can economically produce ethanol from other biomass products.
Good. Thank you. Going on to question 5, and I'll get Martin to start this off after I read it twice. Since the cost of living is going up and the wages of many in Brant County have been frozen or cut back, what are you going to do to alleviate the financial burden put on the workers in the Brant riding? What are you going to do to alleviate the financial burden put on the workers in the riding of Brant?
Well, I think a related issue there with lowered wages is that taxes have gone higher, and that has taken a larger amount of the citizens' disposable income, and their incomes are not going up in relation to or relative to inflation and the inflation-adjusted standard of living. So personally, I would say that I would support a reform tax policy. Our taxes are too high. We need directed tax credits to facilitate improved services for health care, seniors' pensions, and inflation-adjusted standard of living allowance increases for working families, workers and their families, especially in the lower and middle classes. We must stop the international race to the bottom and the loss of the middle class. With sky-high increases in taxes and home heating, gas for our cars, and even the price of groceries, Canadians are doing more work for less money and not even keeping up with the comparable percentage rate increase in the standard of living.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
Thank you. I'd implement a $15 an hour minimum wage across the nation. I'd nationalize the banking system to eliminate interest payments. You're going to help more people have a home. I'd lower your cost of living by nationalizing our resources. No more $1.25 for gas. 70 cents sounds better to me. In 2000, everything doubled in price artificially. We can go back to those levels, no problem. If we stand up for ourselves, we can have a life in Canada. We can afford to pay seniors $2,500 a month single, $35 easily for a couple of people. And that's not a lot of money, that's just bare minimum. We can do things a lot better in Canada if we decide to follow the right people. And if you don't vote for the right people in this election, they might have come back the next time. We'll be discouraged. You'll get the same, and that's what you'll deserve. If you really want to do something about our nation, let's start doing things that are different than what we've been doing to get us here. Thank you.
Nora?
The financial burden on workers, of course, as cost of living goes up, is a major problem. We have a number of small initiatives which we think would help. One is the reduction of payroll taxes, both for employees and for employers, which makes it more attractive to hire people and also means that the worker ends up with somewhat more money in his or her pocket. We would also strongly support retrofitting housing stock so that that heating bills do not have to go through the roof. We have an awful lot of houses in Brantford and Brant County that are not well enough insulated and which cost a fortune to heat. We would definitely increase seniors' pensions, either through the Canada Pension Plan or through an increased guaranteed income supplement, so that our seniors can live in dignity. Also, a very important factor is affordable daycare. At the moment, if you have to pay the going rate, for my daughters it's $45 a day for daycare. That's a tremendous expense. If we lived in Quebec, it would be much, much better. We need affordable daycare so that people who want to go back to work can do so without losing more money than they're making. I guess we'll stop right there. I've got others as well, but...
Okay. Mark?
I may have to speak fast during this one, as this is pretty much the thrust of the entire platform. One of the things we absolutely need to do initially is to take the HST off of home heating. The swindle on the HST is simply this. The government's able to increase its revenues without ever saying it's raising taxes, because your heat, your electricity, and your fuel will keep going up and up and up. And getting 13% of that is a lot... getting 13% of $1.27 for the government revenue is better than getting 13% of $1.02, and that's the swindle. It's really affecting people's affordability. I work as a clinical social worker at the health center, and I have seniors who come into my office who wear a toque to bed because they can't afford to heat their homes. I've knocked on doors in this community, both in the county and in the city, where I have seniors and others in tears because of the issues of trying to make ends meet. We also need to look at the excessive credit card rates and the way those are targeted towards youth and seniors and those on fixed incomes to a point where they're almost never able to get out of debt, and the fees that are applied to small business. I have one small business owner friend who pays $144,000 per year in credit card transaction fees. That would be 3 good jobs in this community. That's just one business. Again, we have so much else, like targeted tax cuts. And again, I'd ask people to look at, when we're looking at wages, both the quantity and quality of work. I have a 21-page document on my website, brantmark.ca, which I'd ask people to see, because the details are there for how we do it locally.
Thank you. Phil?
Well, I do agree with my New Democrat candidate here that the way you take the burden off of individuals is to lower the tax rates. Now, since we have taken government in 2005, Conservatives have lowered the personal taxes to individuals 120 times. It's at its lowest level in 50 years. The average family right now pays $3,000 less in taxes than they did before. Now, when you talk about the HST, the federal government portion of that was reduced from 7 to 6 to 5%, reduced the HST. This is very starkly different than the platforms of the two other parties here, or parties represented. I'm not sure of Nora's, but certainly the New Democrats and the Liberals, who are choosing to raise and elevate taxes, kill jobs by elevating the corporate taxes. So yes, we need to reduce taxes right across the board. That's what we will continue to do. We'll continue in a low tax plan to build our economy, to maintain our economy, to stabilize it and move forward, creating jobs, creating good paying jobs. There have been 450,000 jobs created since July of 2009, and that is the record, that Stats Canada record, and we're very happy with that, but there's a lot more to do.
Thank you.
A lot of those are part-time jobs, of course, I'm sure, as Phil would concede. Folks, there's only so much money, and it's a question of choices. There's only one taxpayer, and that's all of us. It's a question of choices. So what a Liberal government would not do is spend $13 billion of our money on US-style prisons, as the Conservatives want to do. We would not give a $6 billion tax cut to the largest corporations. We would not invest $30 billion in F-35 fighter jets. We will not do that with your money. What we want to do with your money is to take the burden, yes, of hardworking Canadians in this riding. We want to make it easier for that worker to have his or her child or children into early learning and childcare. We want to make it easier for that worker to have money to send his children to community college or university. That's why they'd get $1,000 a month. We want to make it easier for that worker to look after his or her ailing parent through the family caregiver plan. We want to make it easier for that worker's parents, elderly parents, by topping up the guaranteed income supplement. Seniors should absolutely not live in poverty. That's what we want to do with the money as the Liberal Party.
Good, thank you. Question number 6, and we'll start off back at the beginning again, Leslie. What is your party or your plans to work towards the land claim settlements in Brant County and Canada? What is your party's plans to work towards land claim resolution or settlements in Brant County and Canada?
I was born in Canada, the same as many natives were born in Canada. I didn't make any deal with anyone, and I didn't break my word. That was a monarchy, that was past governments, that was betrayal from within. I sure wouldn't want to see my tax dollars going to pay for something that I didn't do. And we can't rewrite history. But I'm certainly not willing to give my tax dollars to a cause that wasn't my fault. I don't think anybody here is willing to give up their home to give back to some people. You don't see the Acadians asking for their land back. My parents came from a country called Hungary, and after the First World War, they lost half their land mass because of the Treaty of Versailles. Bad things happen in history. People that can't defend themselves are taken advantage of. And it'll be a lesson to us not to end up the way that the Native people of Canada did, being betrayed from within and betrayed from outside. Right now, Canada has an unelected foreigner as its head of state. We follow American foreign policy. We've got to get rid of these things. We've got to do our things for ourselves. We've got to think as Canadians to prevent what happened to the natives. But in closing, I wouldn't give them anything. Thank you.
Okay, Nora?
A good friend of mine said that about the land claims, it's not really about the land or even the money. It's about respect and acceptance. Now, we have signed on to the United Nations Declarations on the Right of Indigenous Peoples, and that would imply, if we were going to implement it, which we haven't shown any signs of doing yet, that we would respect their autonomy, their rights on their own land to run things the way they want to respect their cultural diversity. Also, a very important factor is that we need to recognize their rights to the resources and minerals on their land. If there is something to be mined or some gravel or some special other resource of some kind, they should have a say in how that is developed and if it is developed. Basically, all of these things need to happen. First of all, we have to get rid of that Indian Act, and we have to work with the Native people, listen to them, talk with them, and all together work together to resolve these issues so that we can live side by side, the two-row wampum idea. We can live side by side without friction and without undue stress regarding land claims. Okay.
Thank you, Nora. Mark?
New ideas are needed on this. I'm the only candidate that has brought new ideas to the table, and I didn't do it during the election on land claims. I did it beforehand. For the last 10 years, the ball has not moved up the field in Brant. And every MP, whether they're in Brant or other ridings where, and it doesn't matter what party they're in, this is a nonpartisan a statement I'm making, every MP who is in a riding where there's a land claim issue speaks to that issue, or at least tries to. However, many of them say it's their #1 priority, yet when they get into government, they don't create bills that deal with it. They don't look at actual legislation. Talk is one thing, action's another. What I've proposed is a Land Rights Accountability Act. Something that it wouldn't matter which government's in, it wouldn't matter which government, if government changes, I should say. It would be something where it would hold the government to account to sit at those tables, to bargain in good faith. We are missing so many economic opportunities on both sides of this fence. And we need to solve this. We need to solve it sooner rather than later. And the reason is that if we look at this, not only have we missed all these economic opportunities in the last, say, 20 years, we've also made it more expensive. You know, this would have been cheaper to solve 20 years ago than it will be 20 years from now. And that's part of the reason we need new ideas, and we need somebody who will come in and work in partnership with both Aboriginal communities, with people here, and not be afraid to tackle it through action. And when I say action, I mean a bill in the House of Commons.
Thank you. Phil?
Well, this is and will be the #1 issue for the next MP of Brant. It has been, as much as my fellow opponents in this election would like to say it hasn't been, it has been. The clear result of that is the settlement of the largest single land claim in Canada on the Mississaugas of the new credit reserve, $145 million. Our government settled that claim. And working with Six Nations, relationship building, and helping them to empower and sort out their governance so that people at the negotiating table can get results and be able to make a decision. Canada is open and willing, and continues to be. Our government is open and willing. We continue to meet with the various two governing bodies, the Confederacy and the Six Nations elected, to come to a strategy that will achieve results. But it really amounts to, at the end of this discussion, it really amounts to the people of Six Nations deciding who's going to speak for them. Our government is open and willing. We've proven that. We've settled 150 land claims in Canada in the last 12 months. We're open and willing. We extend our arms, and we're ready to settle Six Nations land claims.
Okay, thank you.
The reality about land claims is this. 28 land claims have been filed or registered by Six Nations of the Grand River. All 28 remain unresolved. The talks after the occupation of Douglas Creek Estates, the talks started in May of 2006. As of next month, it will be 5 years of talking. Not a claim resolved yet, not a single one. The so-called easiest claim, the Welland Canal claim, the easiest one, far from being resolved, let alone the other 27. This community, and I mean Brant riding, I mean the county of Brant, the city of Brantford, and the good people on Six Nations, we need certainty. We need an intensity, a ramping up of the talks. We need a finite period of time during which the talks will continue. And if intense talks do not yield a result or a resolution of the claims, then we need to hire a mediator. We need to get something more done than simply 5 years of talks, which to date have achieved nothing whatsoever for this community. That's the reality. And I think, like all of you, I don't know the status of the talks. What have the talks produced? Seemingly nothing, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Martin?
Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 provides constitutional protection to the Aboriginal peoples in Canada. Under that section, Aboriginal rights are in theory constitutionally entrenched. This is the reason why I'm advocating for the constitutional entrenchment of judicial review. Currently, judicial review is not constitutionally entrenched. The legal theory underpinning both constitutionally entrenched Aboriginal rights and constitutionally entrenched judicial review is the legal theory of the separation of powers. The current legal theory that dominates Canada is parliamentary supremacy. That is the theory of power under which our country is being run. The federal government, under that theory, the legislative branch, is still the most powerful branch of power at the expense of the judiciary and the judicial branch. Therefore, Canadians, and including Aboriginals, do not have any truly effective separation of powers. Our Charter of Rights does not do what it is supposed to do, and Canadians do not have any truly objective way to protect against any illegal constitutional actions by the state power, whether that's Canadians or Aboriginal peoples. So that is my answer for addressing land claims.
Thank you. Okay. It's back on agriculture to a degree and some of the farmers here in Brant County. What is your party's position with the support for supply management in Canada and in trade negotiations? I will read that question again. That was specifically put towards Lloyd and that, but what is your party's position with the support of supply management in Canada and in trade negotiations? And for Lloyd to maybe address as well, they said supply management was not mentioned in the Liberal policies for this election. So I leave it like that. Nora, please.
The Green Party strongly supports supply management, which historically has meant a secure income for those involved in that kind of program. And of course, we would, in any international agreements, be standing up for our supply management system. I'd also like to mention that with the current negotiations that are almost secret that are going on with the EU regarding trade and freer trade, we would be very concerned to protect Canadian farmers from what is coming up under that agreement, particularly with things like not just supply management, but also the ability to sell locally and the ability to keep our own seeds and things like that, so forth. Anyway.
Thank you. Mark?
We're fully in support of supply management. Unfortunately, we've seen in the last several years some attacks on the Canadian Wheat Board. And I know some of the people here will agree that if we see the Canadian Wheat Board go, we'll see supply management not far behind go. And that would be very, very unfortunate. Now, we need to reevaluate trade agreements that hurt Canadian producers, of which there are many. The Conservative government in the past has blamed the WTO. But you could look at it and say that the WTO is doing some of the dirty work there for the Conservative government, unfortunately. It's a very important issue for the people who are in this community. It speaks right into their, well, for lack of a better term, breadbasket. It's something that the WTO cannot have the control over our food sovereignty that we let it have currently. And we need to reevaluate these agreements, and we need to renegotiate them where we can.
Thank you. Phil?
First of all, let's correct the record. The Canadian Wheat Board has nothing to do with supply management. It is a board that the Western farmers sell their product through. It acts like a broker, looks for the best price. So it has nothing to do with supply management, and should be decided upon by the way of its existence by the farmers themselves in a plebiscite or a vote as to whether it should continue with the mandate it was originally given. Our government completely and entirely and supportively respects and will fight to the end to protect supply management. We've done this already at the WTO. We've said it's not allowed to go on the table anymore, and we will fight to the end for that. And one of the local advocates that's been very, very strong about this in particular is Bill Emmett. And Bill represents your industry very well, your community very well with the Milk Marketing Board in this country, comes to Ottawa frequently, as you all do very frequently, to express that. We get the message, we will protect it.
Thank you. Lloyd?
I concede to the questioner that there's no mention of supply management in the Liberal Party platform. When I received the platform, I immediately contacted Wayne Easter, former Minister of Agriculture, currently critic in the House of Commons for Agriculture for the Liberal Party. He advised me that it's a given. The Liberal Party has been, is, and will continue to be the party of supply management. So the Liberal Party has been and remains fully supportive of supply management. Mr. Easter was here yesterday, and Brant spoke to 7 or 8 farmers and reiterated again the Liberal Party's unwavering, unflinching support of supply management.
Thank you, Lloyd. Martin?
Well, similar to like I answered a previous question, I absolutely support any initiatives that can be done to help our agricultural supplies or any other anything in business that we produce in Canada that we end up with a supply of, and we need supply management policies on. I support it. But however, you know, considering the World Trade Organization, we have to do something there. Canada simply must enter international free trade in the global free markets somehow for the future on its own terms, and we have to stand up for our country and our sovereignty. You know, that's an international non-governmental organization that is undemocratic and it's unaccountable, and they seem to get their way. I don't really know how they do it. Anyway, through their price, we need to stand up for ourselves through our own, create our own pricing structure powers to protect Canadian agriculture and business. This can be done without retreating from the global trade market, and it must be done without Canada entering WTO-initiated restrictive contracts that exploit our supply-side price restrictions and enrich demand-side WTO-favored countries.
Thank you. Leslie?
I'd suspend Canada's involvement in all international trade agreements. I wouldn't even consider those things when we're trying to decide on food policy. The first thing that we should do is to see if we can feed ourselves. And then once we decide we can do that, then we can consider trade agreements. But you don't want to make policy like that with your hands tied with some trade agreements. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's the end of that question. The next question will be the final question before the recap by each candidate. And Mark, I'll get you to start off. The question is fairly short, and that. Which of your party's plans to deal, or how does your party plan to deal with the rising university tuition fees? How is your party's plan to deal with the rising university tuition fees? And this is the last question for tonight.
And it's an important question. As one of the only candidates, well, actually maybe not, but as one of the few candidates that is likely still paying off some student loans, I understand this one quite well. This is something that I have friends, couples, who literally have over $100,000 in debt without owning a home, and in a job market that isn't always favorable to them. So one of the things we need to do is freeze tuition rates, simply put. We need to not just take some of the family pack ideas that I have heard about, but we need to enshrine them in law. We need to have legislation that will actually help students get equity in their education, equitable access to education. Nikki Ashton, who is the youngest member of Parliament, and I would be the second youngest member of Parliament if elected, she released the Post-Secondary Education Act. It's an incredible act, something that was developed with students, for students, something that understands the realities on the ground. And I encourage everyone here to read it if they have a chance, or at least read the brief on it. It's something that would really help students, not just while they're in school, but for the next 10 years as they're, well, and often 20 years as they're paying off their debts. And also we really need to look at what makes that education valuable. And that again is the job market, and having not just the quantity of jobs, but the quality of jobs that can be related back to that education, and having affordable housing for people who are in that middle bracket of students. We need that as well, so that they have that affordability to therefore pay off their loans and pay for their education in a much more harmonious way.
Thank you. Phil?
Two quick comments. Mark, you're right. It was a long time ago since I paid my student loans off. Actually, I have a daughter who's a little older than you and is still working on paying off those. Education is transformative. That's the words of Dr. Max Blau of Laurier University. It needs to be available and accessible to as many individuals who choose to go. There is no question about that. As part of the post-secondary education caucus for my party in Ottawa, we've looked at all kinds of opportunities to move forward, and some of those opportunities were included in our budget that was turned down by the other parties in Parliament, and subsequent events led to this unnecessary and fourth election in 7 years. And the rising cost of tuition, as a former governor of Wilfrid Laurier, it is hard to control the expenses because wages are increasing, supplies are increasing, and so governments do have a role to play, and as you know, it's a provincial responsibility to fund education. We provide the money nationally, and we have increased it each and every year to record levels. We will continue to increase funding to education, 6% a year, and whereas previous governments actually cut education funding.
I'll just politely correct Phil, who I know inadvertently gave the reason for the election. The budget was actually never voted down. It was never voted on. We're into this election. We're up here. You folks are listening to us because in the 144-year history of this magnificent country, the Harper government, as it prefers to be called, the Harper government, the first ever government to be found in contempt of Parliament. That's why we're having an election. But more to the point with respect to the question, and I've earlier alluded to this, our party's Learning Passport would provide $1,000 per year to a maximum of 4 years to every high school student who wishes to attend university or community college. It would be $4,000, an outright grant, not having to be matched by parent, grade 9 student, all through high school. He or she would have saved $4,000 at the end of the high school years and would utilize that money, $1,000 per year for community college or university. The Liberal Party believes in education. Yes, it is transformative, as Dr. Blau says, but we need to tangibly do something to make it easier for students to go to university, and our plan would do exactly that.
Okay, Martin.
My answer to this one is maybe will sound simpler than my other answers, but I think the answer is in creating self-directed tax credits. I know on the income tax now we do have that, but I think we could expand it to, if your tuition was $50,000, as long as all your receipts are showing, it's all carry forwardable, so for all future income. And then along with that, tax credits going forward given to potential employers who will sign on those students as kind of an apprenticeship relationship. And again, it'd be going forward, tax credits going forward until they're used. So both individuals have nothing to lose, they only have to gain. And I had another one, but I can't remember.
Finished? Finished? Okay, thank you. Listen.
Any service that's in demand, such as medicine, engineering, well, it will be the future if you elect me, science. I think that if students do their work, like when I was growing up, my parents worked really hard. And they told me, your only job, the only thing you got to worry about in this whole world is your marks. That was my job. And for the students who take this seriously, and they want to enter those fields that are in demand, I recommend that we pay their entire way. We won't have shortages of doctors. We'll have a surplus. We can lower doctors' wages through competition. And I'd use the wages of overpaid civil servants to help pay for this. We're going to roll back their wages. We can't afford to keep increasing their wages every year. We have a deficit. We live in debt. People, soldiers, live on the street. They don't even know they're home yet. They're home when they have a roof over their head and food in their stomach. They don't have that. So we're going to stand up to some unions and we're going to do some major things. A lot of them are really easy to do. Stroke of a pen. Canada's got to stand up a little bit. We're a little soft. Thanks.
Thank you. Nora?
That's kind of a scary sound. Yeah, I have several thoughts around this. Now, I certainly understand the problem of the student debt, and that's a really major one. I'm influenced by my son, who is a professor at Brock University, has been for some time, who complains constantly about the fact that the first-year students who come are nowhere near ready for university. And it gets me starting to think about the question of accessibility, whether university really is necessary for everyone. I think there are a lot of people who could do very well going into trades or going into community college things. They can probably get a job more easily than if they come out of university. So those are factors that I'm considering. Also, the considerable shortfall in terms of funding, capital funding for universities is a major problem. And one of the reasons that tuition fees go up is that the universities have to get some money somehow. I think we need to support the universities' capital funding needs to a greater extent. And then, yes, I would try to freeze tuition fees as well, but only if we can balance out the whole picture.
Thank you. I have one more quick question. From the Rogers people who are filming this, they say we've got time for one more quick one. So this will be the final one, and we will start with Phil on this one. It says here, an individual heard a conversation between two American visitors from the Deep South with deep Southern accents. They detailed that they were detailed to you the benefits of the privatization of healthcare systems where they live, citing cost losses. Could you please qualify how the Conservatives or the rest of you for your party would handle health care going forward in 2011 and beyond?
Absolutely be pleased. Again, unequivocally, the protection of our public health care system is the #1 priority for our government, has been, and also rebuilding our system from the cutbacks of the mid-90s, as the previous government took $30 billion out of the system to balance the budget. We will never do that. That was on the backs of the provinces who had to find ways to cut back on health care. We increased it in the last 5 years. We've increased 6% per year. That 6% is well above the level of inflation. It's to rebuild a system, to put doctors back into the system, healthcare professionals, and rebuild it. As our Prime Minister has said, it's the only system he and his family have ever used. It's the only system my family and I have ever used. It's sacred. It protects those not only in disastrous situations, but also in just regular everyday situations. We need to maintain it. We need to make sure it's world class, as it is right in our community in the Brant County healthcare system. It's a world-class hospital we have, Brantford General, and our system is being rebuilt because we are funding it, and we will continue and commit to funding it as a conservative, stable government.
Okay, carry on. If we could just snap it down to maybe a minute or so, please.
Informed people know that when he was president or chairperson of the National Citizens Coalition, Stephen Harper said different things about health care. He was not, those years ago, necessarily a firm advocate of public only. So and we all hear it, if Mr. Harper gets a majority, what might he do? and the specter of two-tier healthcare raises its head based on his earlier comments. The Liberal Party is absolutely, definitively, unwaveringly committed to the public healthcare system. Universal healthcare for everyone, no matter what your wallet size is. You are, under a Liberal government, absolutely entitled to health care, as is every other Canadian.
Thank you. Martin?
Okay. I think that my support for health care, I totally support public health care, and addressing the question of rising costs of funding that health care. I don't want to sound wishy-washy, but it's a very general answer, is that as I'm advocating for the creation of a new Canadian Constitutional Court, if fundamentally, if we can address concerns of our federalist state, issues of Quebec, issues of Aboriginal issues, any faction or any province that has some issue, if we weren't spending money on that and those issues were actually addressed, then we would have more money for healthcare.
Thank you. Leslie?
Compared to Canada, England's a little island with nothing. Yet they have a great healthcare system and they have a great military. If we manage our nation a bit better, we should have at least these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora?
I have known a number of poor families who, if they had to pay for the health care visit for their little children, they would not go to the doctor, and that's a big concern to me. Plus, seniors who are on short incomes also would have to consider before they went to the doctor, and certainly that major test would be out of reach. I certainly support the privatization of health care. I think we also need to have a national pharmacare plan which would reduce drug costs, and that's one of the big problems with our health care system. And also, as I've mentioned before, the Green Party is strongly for all kinds of preventive and even alternative medicines so that we can contain the costs, but they should all be available for everyone who needs them.
Thank you, Nora. Mark?
I'm happy to answer this question, not just as a New Democrat, but as someone who actually works in the healthcare field. When our health accord comes up in 2014, I think we need more MPs who've had experience with their boots on the ground to see where we spend money wisely in the system and where we spend it poorly. And there are some areas where we do spend it poorly. Some efficiencies we could find that would actually help people and our bottom line, simply a national pharmacare plan. Megan Leslie has come to Brantford. She's our health critic. She's an amazing woman who's developing a national pharmacare plan. Now, this plan would actually save us $2 billion a year in costs because, unfortunately, we sometimes are very silly with what we do around drugs. We pay whatever the drug companies want us to. If we had a national pharmacare plan, we would use generics, and we'd be able to use our bulk buying power to save $2 billion per year. That could go into doctors, could go into nurses, could go into preventative health care. There's a second stage of Medicare Tommy Douglas always dreamed of that we never talk about, and it's time we start talking about it.
Thank you. That's the conclusion of the questions. Now we will recap, and we'll start in reverse order to what we did. Martin, would you please start off, please, with a 2-minute recap?
My main issue that I'm advocating for is the creation of a new constitutional court, which would, which would constitutionally entrench the principles of judicial review. We need a charter of rights that can effectively do what it was created to do, ensure the separation of powers theory of law, to ensure the balance of federal powers, and that federal powers are balanced, and to ensure that federal powers do not become a tyranny of the majority. To do this, we need a process of constitutionally entrenched judicial review, which will guard against Section 33 of the Charter of Rights, the quote, notwithstanding clause that effectively protects the legal theory of parliamentary supremacy at all costs and at the expense of the legal theory of the separation of powers, legislative and judicial powers. So to sum up, I feel that this, if we could create such a court, that is a way to address our issues here on land claims locally, and it's also a way to address national issues of Quebec and you know, the issues of Quebec and Quebec's desires supposed to separate. They wouldn't have those feelings if we could work with them in a kind of like a New Meech Lake style sit down, everybody sit down, and, you know, Aboriginal groups, French people, Quebec, and not only that we create a perception, but we create a reality that we are a legitimate, Canada is a legitimate federalist state, and we are here to work together and to live together, and from that we can also address our economic concerns against non-governmental organizations such as the World Trade Organization.
Thank you. Lloyd?
There are issues which we weren't able to touch upon. I'm happy to stay and hopefully talk with some of you about food labeling, environmental farmland stewardship, how to open up international markets to our farmers. But let me just say that when I was the Member of Parliament from June of 2004 until October 2008, I was a member of the Rural Caucus of the Liberal Party. I was a member of the Standing Committee on Agriculture. I knew very little about farming prior to June of 2004. Came to know, and I say this somewhat immodestly, came to know a fair bit through yourselves. Many of you worked with me, mentored me, taught me about farming and about the difficulties which farmers face. And I found it very rewarding to advocate on your behalf. Whatever, in these tough issues and always divisive, but whether it was ethanol, tobacco, getting fairness for these groups, pork producers, beef producers, I was engaged and I was very pleased to advocate on behalf of farmers in this riding. And I would quite simply like to have that opportunity again to advocate on your behalf in Ottawa. So I am requesting your vote on May 2nd. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lloyd. Phil?
You know, farmers throughout Canada are facing the challenges of global competition. We live in a global marketplace. They need a government that understands their priorities. Did you know that the agricultural sector provides 1 out of 8 jobs in this country and accounts for more than 8% of GDP? If re-elected, a Conservative government will create a 5-year national farm and food strategy that will guide Canadian agriculture policy to ensure the survival of the family farm, the highest standards of food safety, and better access to domestic and export markets for farmers across the country. A strong and stable Conservative government will also make regulatory reforms to provide easier access to the best fertilizers, pesticides, and veterinary drugs being used in other countries, while maintaining and improving Canada's high regulatory standards. All Canadians, including rural Canadians, all Canadians, benefit from a strong economy. This election presents a choice. On one hand, a stable Conservative government focused on the economy and lower taxes. On the other, a risky-led coalition that will agree on one thing: higher taxes that will weaken our economy. That isn't what Canadians want. That isn't what the Canadian economy needs. Raising taxes will hurt rural families. I urge you to choose stability and a strong economy.
Thank you, Phil. Mark?
This is an election about choices, about priorities. Our platform is one, and I'm someone who believes strongly in this idea that we need to target our choices to help you. To not just have these blanket corporate tax cuts, which we've seen have created sometimes as many jobs in China as they have in Canada. We need to target our investments, and we need to target our tax cuts to things that benefit us here, to provide that balance that we've been missing for quite some time. Now, we're offering tax cuts as well, but our tax cuts aren't just for the well-connected. Ours are for everyone. Folks who have issues with the HST on home heating, practical first steps. People are right, there is only so much money, and that's why we need to make choices and priorities, and we believe that the priorities are in our communities, not just at the boardroom table. Now, I'd like to thank everybody who's here, and I'd also like to thank those who are debating up here with me. This is my first political debate, and the healthcare question maybe should have come sooner. I was struggling with a cough through most of the debate, and I apologize. But I just want to let people know that we have a chance here for a new kind of politics, one that offers practical first choices on things like affordability, on quality and quantity of jobs, on land rights, education, healthcare, poverty, which didn't come up during this debate but is a strong issue in our communities, and agriculture. Now, if elected, I would be a loud voice, a loud proponent of Alex Adamenko's strategy. I think it's a very good one. I think it's very solid, and I think it was done the right way, in a comprehensive way in our communities, including Brant and Haldeman. We have the plans, and we need your support. So if you have any questions at all, I'm very accessible, and I'll be here throughout the evening to talk to whoever would like to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Nora?
Yes, I too would like to echo Mark's thanks for everyone who was here and the others on the panel. I have found this discussion all very interesting. My only regret is that I'm the only woman. Come on, ladies. And a point of fact, Phil, the Green Party has in its platform that taxes will be reduced for the lower income levels. We would do that by raising the basic personal exemption and also raising the percentage, the taxable percentage for those at the lowest level. Now, it was about 30 years ago we started hearing about these neocon ideas of free trade and, you know, let everybody remove the regulations and so forth, and everything will work out, everybody will do well, and the benefits will trickle down. But what we have seen, if we've been looking, is that the benefits do not trickle down, they trickle up. And the people who are benefiting under our current system are the big corporations. Just think Cargill, Monsanto, think the big processors of food. They are the ones who are winning, the big banks. Now, what we would like to do is to reverse that trend, because we feel that the strength of our country lies in our communities, in the small little businesses here and there, the family farms. We're in challenging times. It's not the same as it used to be when I was growing up. It's a very different world we're moving into. I have two beautiful little grandchildren. I want them to grow up and have their children in a healthy world as well. And so we would be aiming at more organic farming, much less use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and basically a healthy environment for everyone, bringing a strong economy in these new times and also strong communities and a good life together. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Leslie, can you finish up?
Federal ownership of Canada's strategic industries would mean opportunities for Canadian private companies. A little change in monetary policy would mean that you wouldn't need to pay property tax anymore. You wouldn't need to pay interest on your loans anymore. You get your homes for half price to a third of what they cost now over 25 years. You put all these things together, you'll create the most fertile ground for free enterprise anywhere in the world. It'll be a lot easier for people to run their own businesses with lower overhead. If you don't need to feed the horses, if they're not hungry, that's my dad saying hungry is kind of a weird thing, but Basically, I know what he meant. You know, when he didn't have work in the machine shop, yet his machines were paid for. It's not so big of a deal. In Brantford, we lost an entire manufacturing sector that made farm implements, 2 factories, back in the 80s, because of high interest rates. We don't owe these people anything. If you want a real country, you take that in hand. And this might be the last time you see me, the last election. I ran in Vaughan. If people tell me to go to hell again, then let them starve. I can't help but ignorant people. Do your research. You've got 2 weeks before the election. Everything I said is a fact. Just because I'm independent doesn't mean you won't get anywhere. It might start you a new party, but if you don't vote for me, you get nothing. That's what you deserve if you're not smart enough. In Canada, we're very soft. We've got to smarten up a little bit. The world's going to take everything we've got. We're going to be like Canada's native people here. And it might serve us right if we're not as smart. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming out.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Sandra, but before I do that, I'd like to thank the audience for participating, putting forth a lot of good questions tonight. I'd like to thank the candidates for coming up here, putting out their platforms and working very well. And we'll leave it like that. I'll turn it over to Sandra and the Brant County Federation.
Will you turn on the nuclear fallout detectors back on?
Please be quiet.
Turn them off. The fallout detectors.
Yes.
Turn them back on.
You know, they've turned a lot of things off in the world, and I was just sitting there thinking tonight how fortunate we are, as a true Canadian would only say, that if we were in Libya, we'd all be shot if we were sitting up here tonight. But the main thing is it still takes courage to be a candidate. It still takes courage to find time in your busy lives to go and vote. Although we are an agricultural-based debate to begin tonight, every issue that was touched on by your wonderful questions does make a difference to us farmers as well as people in town and rural communities. If we're not thinking about how we're going to get our kids to school, we're thinking about what happens if I can't afford the drugs that I need to keep my condition going, or what happens if my family of elder care, there's no rural services. So thank you to the group, and for the candidates, you will meet each other again another 4 times, I'm sure. So we were privileged to have you first, so I appreciate that. And mostly for taking the time to come out in the community tonight to listen what our people have to say. Thank you, and please feel free to mingle, and we'll catch up with you another day.